The cold that night in Brookhaven was the kind that cuts straight through your coat, the kind that makes every creak in the floorboards sound louder, every whisper of wind feel sharper. It was January, the worst part of winter, and at exactly 11:02 p.m., the silence that had wrapped the town like a blanket was torn apart. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even a car crash. It was a shattering, followed by a distant, muffled boom, like something heavy giving in to fire. On the second floor of a small colonial-style home at the edge of Grant Street, Eleanor lay bolted upright in her armchair. The television still flickered silently in front of her, casting blue light across her crocheted shawl. She'd nodded off during the late-night rerun of The Price is Right, something she never missed. But this noise? This wasn't the TV. Her arthritic fingers trembled as she reached for her cane and moved toward the window. The air in her living room felt suddenly thin, and as she parted the curtains, her breath caught in her throat. A wave of orange and red lit up the night sky. She couldn't see the flames yet, but she saw the smoke, thick and rising from behind the roofline of the abandoned Freeman house. That place had been empty for years, since the family left town after the foreclosure. At least, that's what people said. Her heart thumped painfully against her ribs. She threw the window open despite the cold and screamed into the dark street below. "Fire! There's a fire! Call the fire department!" Her voice broke halfway through the sentence, raspy from fear. Somewhere in the distance, a dog started barking. Lights flickered on in nearby homes. A siren wailed faintly, not close enough yet. Within moments, neighbors emerged from their houses. First came Royden Palmer from the corner store, still in his apron, then Mrs. Janine Leary in her robe and slippers, holding her phone, mouth agape. Soon there were more. The street slowly filled with faces half-lit by the growing inferno. The Freeman house, what used to be white with peeling green shutters, was now a living torch. The fire had spread fast. Too fast. Glass exploded outward from the first-floor windows. The front door glowed with an unnatural orange light. People stared in horror, helpless, backing away from the heat that could now be felt even from the sidewalk. Then Royden shouted, pointing toward the second floor. "I saw someone. There's somebody up there." His voice silenced the murmurs instantly. A few people instinctively stepped forward, only to recoil as more glass shattered above them. The upper floor window was melting inward, and yet, behind the thick black smoke, a shape began to form. First, just a blur. Then eyes, wide, desperate, reflecting the flames. A boy. Small. His arms tight around something. It looked like a teddy bear, one of the arms half burned. His face was smeared with soot, and his lower lip trembled. Then he spoke. At first, nobody understood what he said. The fire cracked and roared too loudly. But then he shouted again, and it came through, almost pleading. "I'm not leaving without her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Leary clutched her chest. Eleanor's cane slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow sound. Another sound cut through the chaos. Sirens. Finally. The first fire engine came screeching into the neighborhood, tires grinding against the icy pavement. Red and white lights lit up every face in the crowd. From the passenger side jumped Hank Morales, the station's fire captain. Broad-shouldered, his jaw set like stone, and eyes that scanned a scene faster than anyone else on his crew. A veteran. People trusted Hank, not because he smiled or gave long speeches, but because when things got bad, he moved. He didn't hesitate. "Get the hoses ready," he barked. "Set up at the east wall. We don't have time to wait. There's a child up there." As his team scrambled, rolling out the hose, breaking ice off the hydrant, climbing down from the rig, a cry pierced the chaos again. The boy in the window. Please, please save Ivy. He wasn't just scared. He was begging. One of the firefighters raised a flashlight and caught a full glimpse of him now. Pale, covered in soot, thin, holding that charred stuffed animal like it was life itself. He looked down at them, not like someone waiting to be saved, but like someone whose world was ending. And in that moment, no one understood who Ivy was. A sister, a friend, another child in the fire, but what everyone felt was the same. There was someone else inside that house, and time was running out. If you like interesting stories, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. And let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. The flames were no longer just inside the house. They were part of the night now. They licked at the edges of the broken windows, climbed the siding like a furious animal, and painted the sky above Brookhaven with a flickering, hellish light. The cold air had turned thick with smoke and the smell of burning wood, cloth, and something else. Something far worse. From the street, neighbors stood frozen, holding their breath. The boy in the window had vanished. Where did he go? Eleanor May gasped from her doorstep, her voice barely louder than the wind. No one answered. The fire moved too fast for questions. On the scene, Fire Captain Hank Morales moved with a calm that belied the urgency in his chest. This wasn't his first rescue, but it was rare, almost unheard of, for someone to disappear from a window right in front of his eyes. He turned, barking out orders with precision. Get the ladder up now. Emmett, cover my back. Zach, you're with me. His team knew the drill, but even they could feel it. This wasn't just another fire. There was something off about this one. The flames didn't behave normally. They were too focused, too fast in their destruction. The smell was chemical. The heat was wrong. As the ladder was rushed to the side of the house, Hank pulled his mask on and started the climb, not once breaking eye contact with the window where the boy had just stood. But when he got close, no sign. Just heavy black smoke pouring outward like breath from a monster. Shit, Hank muttered under his mask. He's gone from the window. He might be unconscious. He didn't wait for backup. With a brutal kick, he and Zach forced open the front door, splintering what was left of the charred wood. Instantly, a wall of heat hit them. The hallway was thick with smoke and glowing embers. Every step crackled underfoot. Furniture had collapsed into piles of ash. The staircase was barely standing, already bowing in the middle. Second floor. Follow the crying, Hank said. And they heard it. Barely audible through the roar of the fire, there was a sob. Small, desperate, a child's cry. Zach moved behind him, steady and silent, axe in hand, watching the corners. Even with the air tanks and masks, breathing was hard. Visibility, worse. But the sound led them. Through a scorched living room, up a groaning staircase, into a hallway where the wallpaper peeled like old skin. That's where they found him. Crouched in the far corner of a smoke-filled bedroom, beside a bed with scorched sheets and broken toys scattered across the floor, was the boy. He was hugging his teddy bear like it was the only thing holding him together. The ceiling above him cracked loudly, timber threatening to give. Hank dropped to one knee. Hey, buddy. My name's Hank. I'm here to get you out, okay? You're safe now. The boy looked up slowly, his eyes red from smoke, his small frame trembling. My name is Nolan, he said, voice hoarse, almost whispering. But you have to get Ivy too. I told her I wouldn't leave without her. Hank moved closer, scanning the room, but there was no one else. Just Nolan and the creeping fire. "We'll go back for her," Hank promised. "I swear to you. But right now, we have to move." He scooped Nolan up, but the child began to struggle, pounding weak fists against his jacket. "No," I said, "I'm not leaving without her." But there was no time. The ceiling groaned again, and then collapsed behind them, burying the bed in fire. Zack shouted something, but the explosion of heat drowned it out. Hank gripped Nolan tighter, protecting his head as they made the dash down the hall, the stairs now burning beneath their feet. Nolan cried out, screaming her name over and over as they escaped the collapse. They burst through the front door just as the front of the house gave in. The moment their boots hit the icy pavement, the second floor caved. A cloud of ash and sparks erupted upward as the roof disappeared into the flames. The crowd gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others turned away. Nolan twisted in Hank's arms, trying to look back. "She's still in there. You left her," he cried, his voice breaking. Hank crouched to his level, pulling off his mask, trying to steady the boy. His own face was drenched in sweat, soot across his forehead. His eyes were burning. "We'll find her, Nolan. But I need you to breathe now. Can you do that for me?" But Nolan shook his head violently. "Ivy takes care of me. She said not to let go. She said if I left without her, he'd come back." Hank stared at the boy. "Who?" But Nolan didn't answer. He just held the bear tighter and whispered again, "She's still in there." The crowd behind them stayed silent. The fire kept burning, and somewhere in the wreckage of the Freeman house, a question had just been born. Who was Ivy? By sunrise, Brookhaven no longer felt like the quiet town it had always pretended to be. Smoke still hung over the burned remains of the Freeman house like a warning. Yellow police tape cordoned off the property, fluttering in the wind, snapping with every gust. Firefighters had cleared the scene hours earlier, but the questions hadn't stopped burning. And they were only beginning. The boy, Nolan, was being held overnight for observation at St. Mary's Clinic, just 2 blocks from the town center. He had second-degree burns on his hands and smoke in his lungs. But that wasn't what kept the nurses awake. It was the way he stared at the wall. Silent, frozen, like he had been left behind by something no one else could see. Across town, in the parking lot of the Chard House, a woman in a dark coat stepped out of a black SUV. Detective Riley Monroe was known for 3 things: her silence, her precision, and the fact that she never took a case lightly. She wasn't local. She'd been brought in from Albany after 2 high-profile child exploitation cases that had shaken upstate New York. The mayor didn't hesitate when he heard a child was found inside a burned building claiming another had been left behind. Riley walked the perimeter of the house, scanning every inch of what remained. She crouched down near the frame of what had once been the front door. Her gloved fingers touched the blackened wood, then the scorched grass beside it. The press hadn't arrived yet. That was good. It gave her time to think. She turned to the lead investigator on the scene, Grant Fletcher, a crime scene analyst with 22 years of watching terrible truths unfold under ash and blood. Witnesses said the boy mentioned a name. "Ivy?" Riley asked. Grant nodded. Repeated it. Screamed it, actually. Said she was still inside. "Any sign of her?" Riley's tone was clipped, not cold, focused. "Not yet," Grant answered. "But we found something." He led her around to the back of the house, where firefighters had cleared a section of debris. Behind what remained of the kitchen was a heavy wooden door, scorched but still intact, oddly untouched compared to the destruction around it. A rusted padlock hung from a latch on the outside. "It was locked from the outside," Grant said. "We had to cut it open." Riley narrowed her eyes. Behind the door was a small room, low-ceilinged and windowless. The air inside was cold and stale, but untouched by fire. As her flashlight swept across the space, the light revealed a child's bed, sheets rumpled and tangled. Crayon drawings covered one wall, stick figures, suns, houses. There was a small bookshelf with 3 books, The Velveteen Rabbit, Charlotte's Web, and Goodnight Moon. A chipped teacup sat beside a half-empty plastic pitcher of water. 2 small toothbrushes lay near the sink in the corner. On the desk, an old teddy bear arm, burned and missing its body. Riley paused when she saw the camera. Mounted near the ceiling, facing down toward the bed, was a small security camera. Cheap, consumer-grade, but active. Still blinking, still powered. Grant walked over with a small evidence bag. "We pulled the hard drive from the recording system. Still intact." Riley took the bag and stared at it for a moment. Then she turned her attention to something Grant hadn't mentioned yet. There was a pillow on the bed. Beneath it, when the sheets were peeled back, they found a stain. Dark, dried, old. "Blood?" she asked. "Preliminary test says yes. DNA's already at the lab." Grant exhaled, shaking his head slowly. There's no way the kid imagined Ivy. Someone else lived here with him. The toothbrushes, the drawings, even the cups. It's clear. There were 2 children. Riley took in the room again. Then she leaned in, inspecting the wall where a name had been written in green crayon. Ivy. Not scrawled like a child writing for the first time, but carefully, like it had been written dozens of times before. Back at the clinic, Nolan still hadn't spoken. Clara Monroe, the on-call child psychologist and Riley's younger sister, sat across from him in a quiet observation room. She had seen trauma before, but something about Nolan unnerved her. It wasn't just his silence. It was how carefully he gripped his singed teddy bear, the same way someone might hold onto a memory they weren't ready to lose. "He keeps whispering her name in his sleep," the nurse said. "Over and over. Ivy. Sometimes he cries, but he doesn't wake up." Clara leaned in. "Nolan," she said gently, "can you tell me more about Ivy? Is she your sister?" The boy blinked slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "She takes care of me. Where is she now?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers gripped the bear tighter. Then, without looking at Clara, he said she wasn't real. But she is. She is. Who said that? Nolan's eyes finally lifted to meet Clara's, and what she saw there made her skin crawl. "The man," he whispered. The footage was worse than Riley expected. She had taken the hard drive straight to the precinct's forensics lab, a sterile room on the 2nd floor of the Brookhaven Police Department. The lighting was too bright, the air always a little too cold, and the smell of coffee mixed with cleaning products clung to the walls like bad news. Riley stood beside a young technician named Adam Klein, barely 24, with a baby face and jittery fingers. He'd been called in early to help scrub through the files pulled from the hidden camera in the back room of the Freeman house. "Most of the recordings are just mundane," Adam said, clicking through hours of black and white footage. "The kids sleeping, drawing, reading. No audio on these files." But Riley knew better than to be lulled by silence. Stillness always came before the storm. She leaned in, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the monitor. The screen showed Nolan sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly lining up toy cars. Beside him, a girl, Ivy, maybe 10 years old, thinner than she should have been. Her hair was long, tangled, and uneven, like it had been cut with dull scissors. She moved slowly, like her body had learned to be quiet. She sat across from Nolan, speaking softly, though the video had no sound. Occasionally, she touched his shoulder when he flinched or reached out to hand him something small. Crayons, paper, a piece of bread. She didn't smile. Not once. Adam clicked forward. The next recording was labeled Day 146. Ivy stood facing the wall, her posture rigid. Nolan sat on the bed, hugging the same bear he carried through the fire. Suddenly, the door opened, and a man entered the room. He was tall, thick-necked, with a shaved head and a sparse, patchy beard. His face looked sunken, like a man permanently starved of light. His movements were slow but deliberate. He pointed at Ivy. She turned. Then he spoke. This video had audio. Training. Phase 3, the man said in a monotone voice. Sit down. Be still. Don't speak unless I say. Nolan immediately slid off the bed and sat cross-legged on the floor, his back straight, his eyes low. Ivy hesitated. He turned to her. I said now. She moved quickly, folding her legs and lowering herself next to Nolan. Adam's hand hovered over the pause button. Jesus. Riley didn't blink. Play the next one. The timestamp read Day 203. Ivy was pacing. Nolan sat in the corner, rocking slightly, humming something. A sound of keys. The door opened again. Same man. But this time, he carried something. A belt. He dropped it on the desk like a threat, then turned to Nolan. She won't listen, he said. But you listen, don't you? Nolan nodded immediately. Yes, sir. She'll be punished if you speak again today. Understood. Nolan didn't respond. The man took a step forward. Understood. Yes, sir, Nolan whispered. Riley stepped back from the screen, trying to ground herself. Her chest was tight, not just with anger, but dread. They weren't just locked in, she said. They were being conditioned. For what? Adam asked. That question hung in the air. Back at the clinic, Dr. Camille Harper, a trauma psychologist from Albany who specialized in long-term abuse cases, had arrived to perform a deeper evaluation on Nolan. He sat curled up in a heavy armchair, knees to chest, arms wrapped around his bear. Camille didn't push. She never did. But over time, Nolan began to speak, not in full stories, not in sentences, but in phrases. Fragments. She said I couldn't cry too loud. She said I could sleep when he left. If I was good, she got dinner too. Camille took notes, carefully, her expression unreadable. Later that day, she sat across from Riley in the observation room. He shows signs of severe dissociation, regression, long-term psychological manipulation. I've seen it before. Kids from compound cults, covert trafficking rings. It's always the same pattern. Isolation, control, dependency. But what's striking is that Ivy was protective. She shielded him? Riley asked. Camille nodded. Took the blame. Redirected punishment. Built structure inside the chaos. For him, she wasn't just another captive. She was his caretaker. Riley took a breath. And the man. He conditioned both of them. He taught Ivy to maintain the system. Meaning Ivy participated? No, Camille said firmly. She adapted. She kept him safe the only way she knew how, by being what the man expected. But it was a prison, and she was just a child too. There was a pause. Then Camille added something she hadn't planned to say aloud. Nolan keeps repeating one line. She'll be ready Thursday. Riley's eyes narrowed. Ready for what? Camille's expression hardened. We're not dealing with someone improvising here. This man had phases, rituals, control mechanisms. This was long-term, structured. They were preparing the children for something. We just don't know what. Riley's phone buzzed. A message from Grant. DNA from blood confirmed. Matched a missing person file. Ivy Calder. Disappeared in Stanton, Vermont. 5 years ago. Riley stared at the text, her blood running cold. She looked at Camille. That girl didn't just survive. She's the key to everything. But the worst news was still coming. Adam burst into the room moments later, out of breath, his face pale. "Detective," he stammered, "you need to see this. The last file. It's labeled day 427. But the footage is empty. No kids. No sounds. Just static." Then the camera cuts off. Riley frowned. "Power outage?" "No," Adam said. "Everything else is intact." It was shut off intentionally. Riley's stomach turned. "Day 427, she whispered. "The fire was on day 428. She turned to Camille. "I think Ivy tried to escape." The wind swept through the empty parking lot outside St. Mary's Clinic, carrying with it the scent of cold rain and burnt timber. The town of Brookhaven felt like it had shrunk overnight. Stores that usually opened early stayed closed. Conversations that once buzzed in the diner or gas station were now whispers and silence. The fire had changed everything. Inside the clinic, the lights were low, and the hallways were quiet. Dr. Camille Harper sat in a softly lit therapy room across from Nolan, who hadn't moved from his blanket cocoon in over an hour. His bear, charred, worn, and soaked with weeks of fear, sat tightly gripped in his arms. She didn't rush him. Camille had worked with children who had survived war zones, underground trafficking networks, and cult-like isolation. But Nolan had something else. Guilt. Not just trauma. Not just fear. But something that clung to his words like shadows. The belief that he had failed Ivy. He finally spoke without being prompted. "It was the coldest night," he whispered. I remember because my toes hurt. Ivy always gave me her blanket." Camille leaned forward slightly, keeping her voice calm. "What happened that night, Nolan?" His eyes stayed on the bear. "He called her," he said. "The man. He made her come upstairs. Said she didn't finish phase 4. That she'd failed. But she said..." He paused, his bottom lip trembling. "She said she wouldn't do it anymore. She yelled. First time I ever heard her yell. She told him, 'I'm not doing this anymore.'" Camille's spine straightened slowly. "What did he want her to do, Nolan?" He didn't answer directly. "She always said I didn't have to do it, that it was okay if I cried. But I heard her that night. She screamed. Then, she didn't." Camille stayed very still. In these moments, pressure could destroy everything. "Do you think she's alive?" Nolan's hands tightened around the bear, and for a long moment he didn't speak. Then, so softly Camille almost missed it, "She said everything was going to be okay. And Ivy never lied." Meanwhile, back at the Brookhaven Police Department, Riley stood in the evidence room, reviewing the missing persons database from Vermont. The name, Ivy Calder, was already burned into her mind. The girl had vanished from Stanton 5 years ago. No signs of forced entry. No suspects. No trace. Her photo from that time showed a girl with a crooked smile and a front tooth missing. 10 years old, just like the girl in the video. But now, Riley had a new detail. DNA from the pillow confirmed it. The blood found in the locked room belonged to Ivy. That part of the mystery was no longer in question. But how had she gotten from Stanton to Brookhaven? Grant Fletcher entered with a printed file and a folder marked Interstate Transit Surveillance. "We got a hit," he said. There was a long-distance truck route from just outside Stanton to Buffalo, used as a drop line for illegal shipments. The trucker who owned that route died 2 years ago of a stroke. But the name tied to 2 other deliveries in that time frame was Tobias Wren. Riley's eyes narrowed. Tobias Wren, the ex-cop who vanished in 2022 after his suspension. Grant nodded. Same one. Suspended for misconduct. Suspected of using police resources to track vulnerable minors. But nothing was proven. He disappeared before the charges could stick. Riley exhaled sharply, her mind connecting pieces faster than she could speak them. He used his badge to get access. He found Ivy, took her, then kept her long enough to turn her into whatever he needed her to be. But why bring Nolan into it? Grant asked. Riley stared at the board in front of her, where 2 photos now hung side by side. Ivy Calder and Nolan, last name still unknown. She was the prototype, Riley said. But she was older, smarter. She learned to protect. He needed another, one younger, easier to mold. And he used Ivy to control him. At that very moment, 200 miles away, in a laboratory in Albany, a forensic pathologist named Dr. Lynn Tran was running final tests on the blood sample. She had gone one step further, matching Ivy's DNA not just to the crime scene, but against the national database of missing persons. She cross-checked for any known relatives still alive. And there it was, a DNA match. Ivy Calder, born June 16, 2009. Biological mother, Angela Calder, deceased 2 years ago. Father, unknown. No siblings. But under connections, a second name appeared. Nolan Ellis. Born December 15, 2016. Reported missing in Rochester. Vanished from foster care. He wasn't just another victim. He and Ivy weren't strangers. They were not related by blood, but the system had recorded them under the same temporary housing address in 2018. They had met before the abduction. They were both placed in the same foster home. They had been taken together. The snow began to fall again in Brookhaven by the time the warrant came through. Riley stood outside the charred Freeman house, now surrounded by temporary floodlights, generators humming in the background. With the legal clearance in hand, her team returned to the wreckage, not to put out fires this time, but to uncover truths buried in ash. They moved like surgeons now, careful, slow, deliberate. The structure was compromised, but part of the basement had held. It was there, beneath the kitchen, that they found it. A locked trapdoor. Beneath the door, a second room. This one wasn't like the first. No bed, no toys. It was cold, metallic, and windowless. The walls were padded with old insulation wrapped in plastic, like someone wanted to muffle sound. A rusted chain bolted into the wall. Faded claw marks on the floor. And in one corner, a small stack of journals. Riley pulled on gloves, lifted the top one, and opened the cracked spine. Inside, drawings. But these weren't childlike. They were calculated, symbolic. Human eyes, scratched out in red crayon. Rooms, drawn over and over, each one identical. Stick figures, always in pairs, then alone. And words. Always the same words. She obeys. He survives. Back at the precinct, Riley sat across from Rick Morrow, a retired officer who had worked with Tobias Wren before his disgrace. A quiet man, grey around the temples, always chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "I knew he was strange," Rick said, eyes low. "But I didn't know it was like this." "You're saying you didn't see any signs?" Riley asked. "A cop tracking foster kids? Running training phases? Abducting children, and no one in your department thought to ask questions?" Rick's jaw tensed. He covered it up. He had contacts. He knew how to erase trails. Hell, half of us didn't even know he'd been suspended until after he disappeared. Did he have help? Rick hesitated. Then, there was a man, Middle Eastern, spoke perfect English. Quiet. Wore those leather gloves like he was afraid to touch things. Tobias called him Yusuf. They met twice that I know of. Never inside the department. Always off-site. The name hit Riley like a gut punch. She'd seen it before, in sealed documents from a trafficking case out of Michigan. Yusuf Amin, flagged by Interpol, never formally charged, always just out of reach. "Where did you see them last?" Riley asked. Rick rubbed his face. 3 days before the fire. Harper Ridge bus station. Tobias was swapping clothes in the bathroom. He left in a blue hoodie, carrying a duffel bag. "I was off duty. Thought it was weird, but I didn't say anything." Riley leaned forward. "Do you remember the license plate of the taxi that picked him up?" Rick nodded slowly. "Only the last digits. 777. By that night, Riley had issued a statewide bolo on Yusuf Amin. But something gnawed at her. Why burn the house now? Why not months ago? Why not when Ivy first disappeared? She stared at the footage again, the final video, day 427, just static. Then it cut. She replayed Nolan's words in her head. She said if I left without her, he'd come back. She didn't think Ivy ran. She thought she'd been planning something, a way out. And that night, she might have tried. If the camera was disabled on purpose, then she wasn't running blindly. She was doing it to protect someone. And someone tried to stop her. 2 days later, a phone rang at the Brookhaven police station. It was a hospital. Not in New York, but in Maple Hollow, a rural town across the border in Massachusetts, where the roads curled like vines and the woods swallowed sound. A girl had been dropped off at St. Helena Memorial, late at night, by a man who gave a false name and disappeared before staff could stop him. The girl was dehydrated, malnourished, non-verbal. Her hands were raw from frostbite. Her back showed signs of old scars, not from burns, but from repeated blunt trauma. But the most important detail was this. During sedation, she whispered one name. Nolan. When the call reached Dr. Clara Monroe, the child psychologist assigned to Nolan, she didn't wait for protocol. She and Captain Hank Morales were already in the car before the sun rose. The ride to St. Helena Memorial felt like something out of a different lifetime. Hank gripped the wheel tightly, barely speaking. Clara, sitting beside him, stared out the window. In her lap, she held a copy of Ivy's missing persons photo. She was barely 10 when she vanished. She would be 15 now. Could it really be her? At the hospital, they were led to a recovery room where a small figure lay beneath 2 large sheets. The girl was thin, hollow. Her eyes stared blankly at the wall, like she wasn't sure if this world was real. Clara stepped forward slowly, then knelt beside the bed. Ivy! she whispered. No reaction. She tried again, softer this time. Nolan is safe. A flicker. The girl's eyes moved. Then, a single tear slid down her cheek. She hadn't spoken in days. Not until now. And her first word came like a ghost through cracked lips. He waited. If you're enjoying this story, leave your like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our content. The silence in the hospital room was louder than anything. Clara didn't move. Neither did Ivy. The girl's eyes had shifted, yes, and the tear was real, but she hadn't spoken again. Not a word. She simply stared, her lips slightly parted as if the effort to ask, he waited, had used up the last of her strength. Clara took her time, inching closer. Yes, Ivy. He waited, she whispered. He still is. Hank stood at the door, not speaking. His chest tightened with something that wasn't just grief. It was awe. Ivy had been a name on a report, a figure in a story. But now she was here, breathing, broken, but alive. A child that had defied death, fire, and unthinkable darkness. She was no longer a rumor. She was real. The attending physician, Dr. Janice Rowe, entered quietly, glancing between the girl and the two visitors. She looked stunned, guilty, even. Clara stood. How long has she been here? 3 nights, Dr. Rowe said softly. She was brought in just before midnight. No ID, no memory. We sedated her because of the panic. She wouldn't let anyone touch her. But when she slept, she kept whispering one word. Nolan, Clara finished. Dr. Rowe nodded. Over and over. There was a long pause. Then the doctor hesitated before speaking again. I know who she is, she said finally. I saw her before. Years ago. Clara's expression tightened. What do you mean? Dr. Rowe swallowed hard, her voice unsteady now. In 2020, I was working at a private clinic in Vermont. A man brought in a girl, said she fell off a swing and fractured her arm. She wouldn't speak. He did all the talking. Said he was her father. She flinched every time he touched her. And you didn't report it? Clara asked, trying to stay composed. I suspected something, Dr. Rowe admitted. But there was no proof. No bruises on her face. No screaming. Just a girl with a broken arm and a blank stare. I documented it. But I didn't call child services. Rage curled in Clara's gut, but she kept her voice low. That man was Tobias Wren, and that girl has been held captive for 5 years. Dr. Rowe covered her mouth with her hand. I thought it was a domestic problem. If I'd reported it. Hank finally spoke from the doorway, his voice gravelly. Then she wouldn't have burned alive in our town. The room fell silent again. Back in Brookhaven, Detective Riley Monroe was running out of patience. Her investigation into Tobias Wren had uncovered more than she expected. Names of missing children, coded files, and off-the-record meetings between former cops and out-of-state contractors. But there was one constant in all of it: Yusuf Amin. He was the ghost in every hallway, the man no one could trace, but whose name always surfaced when children vanished without a trace. Riley placed a call to Homeland Security, then another to Interpol, and then her phone buzzed. A message from Agent Sylvia Mendoza, FBI. Yusuf Amin sighted. Crossed into Quebec 2 days ago. Accompanied by unknown minors. Likely part of transport network. We need to move now. Riley replied immediately. What about Tobias? The answer came seconds later. Located. Burlington shelter. Alone. We're closing in. It was snowing hard by the time Riley reached Burlington. She met with federal agents at the edge of the rail station, where Tobias had been spotted using a fake name, waiting for a train east. He looked different. Thinner. Disheveled. His head was shaved again. No beard. No obvious emotion on his face. He sat quietly, surrounded by Joey agents, hands cuffed, ankles shackled. On the table in front of him sat a burner phone and an empty duffel bag. Riley walked into the interrogation room slowly, locking eyes with him. Tobias didn't flinch. He looked bored. "You've been running a long time," she said. "I was never running," he replied. "Just moving pieces." She sat across from him. "We found Ivy. She's alive." His jaw ticked slightly, but still no expression. "She's not the same girl," he said. "You can't undo training. You can't cut out programming. That girl was designed to survive. That's what I do. I design survivors." Riley leaned forward. "You didn't break her." He didn't respond, but when she pulled out a small speaker and hit play, his eyes changed. It was a clip, just a few seconds, of Nolan's voice from a recorded session at the clinic. "Ivy said I was real, that I wasn't a toy." Something inside Tobias cracked. He didn't show pain, but his fingers curled. His shoulders tightened. For the first time, he reacted. Riley saw it. "You thought they'd be like puppets forever," she said. "But they broke your system. Ivy didn't survive because of you. She survived in spite of you. And now she's free." Tobias turned away, but Riley wasn't done. "You didn't turn them into soldiers. You made them warriors. And now, you've lost." He whispered something under his breath. Riley leaned in. "What did you say?" He looked at her with dead eyes. "Doesn't matter. More are coming. 2 more, tonight." Her blood ran cold. "Where?" But Tobias just smiled, and said nothing. The moment Riley left the interrogation room, she was already dialing. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but her urgency cut through every syllable. 2 more. Tonight. That's what he said, she told Agent Sylvia Mendoza. "We need to sweep every transport hub between New York and Quebec. Buses, trains, freight lines, everything." "Understood," Sylvia responded. "We'll issue an alert to Border Patrol." "You think Yusuf is still with them?" "I think we're hours too late," Riley said. "Or minutes too early." In the calm after the storm, Ivy lay awake. She was no longer sedated, but sleep didn't come. The hospital room was dim, and though Clara sat silently beside her, Ivy barely noticed. She was somewhere between the now and the memory, between the bed and the basement floor. Her fingers twitched unconsciously, searching for the edge of the old blanket she used to hide under. But it wasn't there. Instead, her voice cracked the silence like glass. "I told him we'd leave together." Clara looked up. It was the most Ivy had spoken since arriving. "You mean Nolan?" Ivy nodded slowly. "He cried too much. He was too loud." The man said, "That made him a failure." Clara's breath caught, but she didn't speak. Ivy's hands clenched around the hospital sheets. "He stopped feeding me when Nolan cried. If I made him behave, we both ate. If I didn't," she hesitated, then whispered, "I'd get the belt." "Ivy," Clara said softly, "none of that was your fault." The girl didn't respond. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was confessing. On day 427, I broke the camera. I knew he'd come back. I knew he'd hurt Nolan. I thought if I set the fire, he wouldn't make it in time. Clara's heart stopped. You set the fire? Ivy nodded again. I tried to get Nolan out, but the door stuck. He told me to run. I didn't want to. Clara reached out gently, her hand resting over Ivy's. You saved him. Ivy didn't answer. At the Brookhaven precinct, chaos had broken loose. The arrest of Tobias Wren made national news. His mugshot was plastered across television screens, his name trending on every social media platform. Journalists were outside the station. Protesters too. But Riley ignored all of them. She sat with Grant and Agent Mendoza in the war room, maps and digital monitors lighting the walls. He said they'd arrive tonight, Riley repeated. That means someone, Yusuf, is moving 2 more children into the country. Why Brookhaven again? Grant asked. Riley shook her head. I don't think it's about Brookhaven. I think it's about the system, the shelter, the people who stayed quiet. This isn't a coincidence. It's a network. She pointed to the map. There are at least 4 known stops along the New York border that Yusuf used for drop points. But only one has both privacy and low security. She tapped the name, Ashfield Industrial Depot. It had been abandoned for years. No cameras, no guards. At least, that's what they thought. 2 hours later, federal agents swarmed the depot under cover of darkness. The cold bit through their gloves, and the snow muffled every step. Inside, the building was quiet. Too quiet. They found signs of recent occupation, footprints, a still warm thermos, a piece of rope recently cut, and in one corner, a child's shoe. Small, purple, torn at the sole. But no children. No Yusuf. Not yet. Then a voice came through the radio. Movement. Northeast corridor. 2 individuals. Adult male, 2 minors. Riley's blood surged. She sprinted down the corridor, her flashlight beam bouncing off cracked concrete. They rounded the corner, and there he was. Yusuf Amin. He didn't run. Not at first. He stood in the shadows, 2 children behind him, both under 10, blindfolded, hands zip-tied. He was calm, composed, and smiling. I was wondering when you'd show, he said. Riley raised her weapon. Get on the ground. He looked at the children, then at her. You should be thanking me. They're alive because of us. On the ground. Now. He dropped to his knees slowly, raising his hands. But then his smile widened. I'm not the last. I'm just the delivery man. Back at St. Helena Memorial, Clara returned to Ivy's room after stepping out for a moment. But the bed was empty. Ivy was gone. Panic surged through her chest as she searched the hallway. Nurse! Where's Ivy? The nurse looked confused. She was just here. But Clara saw the window, wide open, and lying on the windowsill was Nolan's teddy bear. The wind cut sharp across the parking lot of St. Helena Memorial as red and blue lights flashed like alarms in a nightmare. Officers swarmed the perimeter. Nurses searched every hallway. But Clara already knew the truth. Ivy had run. Not because she didn't feel safe, but because she didn't believe she deserved to be. The teddy bear on the windowsill said everything. It wasn't just a memory. It was a message. She was giving it back. Surrendering it. Surrendering him. Inside the incident room at the Brookhaven precinct, The air felt heavier than ever. Riley slammed her phone down on the table. "She's gone." Grant looked up from the map, confused. "Who?" "Ivy," she said. "She slipped out a hospital window. Left Nolan's bear behind. She's trying to disappear." "Why now?" Mendoza asked. "She was safe." Riley's voice was quiet but hard, because in her mind, the second those kids were saved, her purpose was over. They had all seen the signs. Ivy had been trained to protect, to obey, to take punishment so others wouldn't have to. Even in survival, she was still stuck in the role she'd been forced into. Now, with the children rescued, she didn't know who she was anymore. Riley turned back to the surveillance board. "We need to find her, before someone else does." Mendoza stood. "She's smart. If she's running, she'll go somewhere she's already studied. Somewhere with exits. Shadows. Places she can control." Grant nodded. "She spent 5 years reading people. Reading Tobias. Reading Yusuf. She's not just running, she's hiding." Riley's voice dropped. "She's preparing for something." Meanwhile, Nolan sat in the therapy room at St. Mary's, his eyes locked on the window. "She's gone, isn't she?" he asked. Dr. Camille Harper didn't lie. She left. Nolan didn't cry. He didn't scream. He did something worse. He went quiet, like a light had turned off inside him. "She said we'd leave together," he whispered. "She promised." Camille moved closer, kneeling in front of him. "She didn't leave because of you." "Yes, she did." He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "She thinks she's bad." Camille touched his shoulder gently. "She's not bad, Nolan. She's hurt. And she thinks if she stays, she'll hurt others." He looked up, blinking slowly. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." He leaned in. "When we were little, the man said we were options. He said not all the kids would make it. That some were for practice, and some were for transfer. But Ivy told me she made herself the only option. That way, I'd get left out." Camille's eyes stung. "She traded her place for yours." He nodded. "And she was happy to do it." Back at the station, Riley received a message she didn't expect. A physician from Vermont, someone who had seen Ivy years earlier, had come forward after seeing the news. Dr. Janice Rowe. She requested to meet in person. Riley drove to the remote clinic, a white building tucked between silent pine trees and a half-frozen lake. The inside smelled of antiseptic and fear. Dr. Rowe looked hollowed out, as if carrying a weight she hadn't put down in years. "She came to me once," she admitted. "I didn't realize who she was. She had a broken arm. Said she fell. And you didn't report it?" "I should have. But he, Tobias, he knew how to speak like a parent in crisis. Like someone just trying to handle a troubled child." "You said she didn't speak?" Dr. Rowe nodded. "But she looked at me. And I've never forgotten it. It was the look of someone begging, but afraid to beg out loud." She reached into a folder and pulled out a photocopy. "I kept this. I don't know why, but she left it behind when she was in the waiting room. A drawing." Riley took the paper gently. It showed a house. 2 stick figures standing at the window. One bigger, one smaller. Beneath it, in a child's handwriting, "We are not lost. We are waiting." Later that night, Clara sat with Nolan again. He had fallen asleep in the chair, arms curled around his knees. But he wasn't peaceful. He flinched every few minutes, whispered Ivy's name, clutched at the air. Clara stayed with him, watching over him the way Ivy used to. When the door opened, Hank Morales stepped inside, holding something in his hand. A cell phone. Riley had sent a voice message. Clara pressed play. Riley's voice came through, low and intense. We found something in Tobias's phone. A list. Names. Dates. Ivy's was there. But so was Nolan's. And 6 others. Some we've located. Some are still missing. Clara listened closely as Riley continued. They weren't just victims. They were being groomed for something bigger. Tobias didn't work alone. Yusuf was just one part of it. We've traced funding from offshore accounts tied to missing children in other states. It's not over. There was a pause. Then, but here's the thing. Ivy was the only one who figured it out. The only one who broke free before they wanted her to. She burned the house not to escape. She did it to destroy everything they had built. Clara looked at Nolan, still trembling in his sleep. She didn't leave because she gave up, Riley's voice said. She left because she knew. Someone else is still out there. And just before sunrise, in a gas station bathroom 2 towns over, a girl with tangled hair stood in front of a cracked mirror. Her coat was too big. Her hands shook. But her eyes, sharp, focused, determined. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something folded tightly. A piece of paper. On it, a map. A name circled in red. Luis Danner, former officer. Last known address, Millfield. Ivy whispered to herself, like a prayer, one by one. Then she walked out the door. It was just past 8 in the morning when Riley got the call. Her phone buzzed against her desk. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something made her answer. The voice on the other end was low, strained, male. She was here. Riley sat up straight. Who is this? A pause. Then, Luis Danner. I need to talk to someone. I need protection. She grabbed a pen. Where are you? Another pause. Ivy came to my house last night. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, like she already knew what I'd done. Where are you now? Millfield, West Pine Road. But you need to hear this first. Riley stopped, listened. Luis's voice trembled. I worked with Tobias. Not directly. I turned my head when things didn't add up. He told me he was rescuing kids, that the system was broken. He said they were safer with him than in state care. And you believed him? Riley asked, her voice hard. No, Luis whispered. But I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. And that makes me worse. There was silence on the line for a second. Then, she didn't come to hurt me. She came to look me in the eye. When Riley arrived at Luis's house an hour later, he was sitting on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket, hands trembling. I didn't sleep, he said. Couldn't. Inside, Riley found a photograph on the kitchen table. It showed a younger Luis in uniform, standing beside Tobias Wren. There was something scribbled over it in black ink. You watched. Now you see. Riley stared at it for a long time. She's not just running, she said out loud. She's giving them a chance to confess, before she burns them all down. 3 days passed. The national spotlight grew hotter. Ivy's name was everywhere. News channels debated whether she was a survivor, a hero, or a danger. A task force had been formed. Some called her unstable. Others called her brave. But no one understood her, except Nolan. He sat with Dr. Camille, looking at the photos of the children rescued from Yusuf Amin's last drop point. He pointed at a little girl with braids and big brown eyes. She used to sing at night. I thought she was a dream. He pointed to a boy with a scar on his chin. He cried a lot. Ivy gave him her food. Then, with a shaky finger, he pointed at himself. She protected me. Camille nodded. She still is. That night, Clara stepped outside the clinic for air. The cold hit her immediately, but she didn't care. She stood alone in the parking lot, arms crossed. Then, footsteps. She turned. Ivy stood at the edge of the light. Dirty. Exhausted. But steady. I'm not here to stay, she said. Clara's breath caught. Ivy. I just wanted to see him. One last time. Clara moved forward. He thinks you're gone. Ivy looked down. I left the bear so he'd stop waiting. You broke his heart. I was trying to save it. Silence stretched between them. Then Ivy asked, "Can he come outside?" Clara hesitated. "I'll stay back. I just need to see him." Inside, Clara approached Nolan gently. "There's someone outside," she whispered. "She's waiting." His eyes lit up. He ran. He didn't say anything when he saw her. Neither did she. He ran to her, and she caught him like she'd never let go again. They both started crying. Not loud, just enough to break the silence. He looked up, voice shaking. "Why did you leave? I thought I had to finish it alone." "You don't." She nodded. "I know that now." Weeks passed. Tobias Wren was sentenced to life in federal prison, charged with child trafficking, abuse, and conspiracy. Yusuf Amin was extradited to face international crimes tied to the disappearance of over 40 children. Luis Danner testified. So did Rick Morrow. So did Ivy. And when she stood in court, she didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just told the truth. Months later, Ivy and Nolan moved into a small house with Clara and Hank. Nothing fancy. Just safe. With meals at a real table, warm beds, and a backyard with a swing. One spring afternoon, Ivy stood at the top of a hill, holding a white kite shaped like a bird. "Look," she said, letting it fly. "It's not stuck anymore." Nolan laughed, running after it, arms wide. "You can't catch me, sister." And from the porch, Clara smiled through tears. Not because the past had been erased, but because something else had taken its place. A future. And if you like this story, you'll surely love the next one appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and turn on notifications. See you next time.